It's Blue, baby, and you're now watching Blue Dope. We have Kendra Barnes today, the key resource, real estate. I'm going to call you a guru, right? Or just some,
Okay.
and really the person that could kind of help everyone kind of get into it, get started out. I'm definitely curious myself. I have a few tenants, and I think I'm doing something, but I think there's a big journey to it. I definitely want to get deeper into real estate myself. So, firstly and foremostly, how are you?
I'm doing well. I mean, honestly, I'm a parent in a pandemic and that's kicking my
Mm.
butt some days. But other than that, I'm good. How
Ha-
are you doing?
I'm good too. I feel you on that. I got three little ones. How many you have?
And I only have one and I'm up here. I'm up
Oh,
here like it's kicking my butt.
oh no, no. The remote life was real, especially last year. Just having three kids doing remote schooling and stuff. That was
Yeah.
a little hectic. A little hectic.
Yeah, it's crazy. But we're making it though. We're making it.
There you go. So for everyone who's new to you, where are you from?
So I am based in San Antonio, Texas right now, but I started investing in real estate in DC and Maryland. I'm a military brat. I don't know where I'm from. I'm from everywhere.
So I mean, I'm sure there's a journey. I guess where were your? I'm gonna start out with where was your favorite place growing up, and how long did you spend there?
I would say Hampton, Virginia, because that's where like
Mm.
most of my family is from, and I spent the
Okay.
most time there. So yeah,
Okay, okay. So you did have a little place to call kind of home for a long
yeah,
time.
I did.
And it sounds like the DMV called you back originally for your first investments.
That's correct. Yep.
Where'd you go to school though?
So I went to undergrad at North Carolina A&T State University in Greensboro, North Carolina, and then I went to graduate school at Purdue University in Indiana.
So you even hopped around for college.
Yeah, I
What
did.
what was school life even like, and what was your personal life even like as a army brat and going around?
Yeah, so at school, I actually majored in agricultural economics, which is so random because it's like agriculture, and I did not grow up on a farm. I don't even like being outside for real. So what happened was they were giving out full ride scholarships for Black students who would go to an HBCU and major in
Okay.
agriculture because not a lot of minorities were majoring in that. And my mom had told me, she was like, if you get a full ride, I'll buy you a car. So I'm like applying
Deal.
for all these full ride scholarships. And I got that one. I'm like,
Where's
cool.
my
Cause I
car?
wanted to go, like, literally, where's my car? Cause I wanted to go to a HBCU anyway. And
Okay.
so that checked the box. She bought me the car. And at the time, I was like, what, 17 years old. I didn't really realize the impact of what like going to school with no student loans, like how that would
Mm.
actually benefit my life. I was worried about that car. And so it all
What a
worked out.
blessing in disguise.
Yeah. And then I went on to Purdue and got another full ride actually from Purdue
Wow.
too. And so I graduated completely debt free, which is a
Wow.
blessing. Hmm.
That's a huge blessing. And mama knew what she was doing with the incentives that she had.
She did.
I mean, what was your experience like at HBCU?
I absolutely loved it. Like you literally could not pay me $1 million today to undo that. Like I
Mm.
love my school. I love my HBCU. There's just like there's nothing like it. I absolutely like love the environment. I can't even describe it, but it's there's nothing like that like camaraderie that we had.
I didn't get to experience that. I mean, I went to Temple, which people jokingly say is HBCU ish, but I didn't even finish it. I went to Hofstra, which was the complete opposite, right?
Oh,
But
okay.
I mean, but I think a lot of my guests have went to different HBCUs, and it's interesting hearing the experience. But I mean, even prior to that, I could imagine just kind of traveling all around. That's probably the first place where you got to just really sit there and be and build a group of solid friends. I mean, even myself, I went to different schools every year at one point in my life. So, I mean,
Yeah.
what was that difference like just in regards to just even relationships you built?
Yeah, for me, like I love moving and making new friends, and so that's never been a problem for me. But then I started meeting people who were like from North Carolina, like didn't want to like leave more than an hour from home. Like they live like within an hour of the school. They went home every
Wow.
weekend, and that just wasn't like when I moved into my dorm room at A&T. My parents were in London. Like they were living in London because that's where they got stationed for
Still
the
in the army.
military.
Wow.
Yeah, and like
Wow.
everyone had their parents with them and stuff, and I was like by myself like moving in,
With your
but
car.
with my
With,
car. And let me tell you, this car, it was a
let's hear about this
used
car.
it was a used Toyota Corolla that I think my
Oh,
mom
she
got for
got
like
you.
$4,000.
She
I
got
loved
you.
it. Listen, I loved it. Like I was one of the only people who was a freshman that had a car. Like it didn't
Facts.
even matter to me. That thing held me down.
Now I had a maximum my freshman year, and I was living. But like you said,
Yeah.
like hardly anyone has a car rolling up. But
It
you
was
you was
great.
kind of like TLC. I mean, it wasn't a RAV4, but you was in the Toyota family. Just that was part of the deal.
Yeah, it was straight for me though.
So you finish school and you get your degree in agricultural and farming, but you didn't end up on a farm. So what
No.
what was the next phase of your life? Where did you kind of go with this degree that you had, and did you ever get that farming experience?
No, so I ended up actually going to grad school after. So the scholarship, it basically is sponsored by the Department of Agriculture.
Okay.
And what they do is not only do they pay for your schooling, they give you a guaranteed government job upon graduation. So the scholarship is called the 1890 Scholars Program.
And that's still
One
around. That's still
it's
available.
it's still around. Actually, the
Wow.
deadline just passed for this year's application. But you guys, if you're listening and you know anyone who's in college or going to college, because you can still get it while you're in college, and they'll pay for the
Nice.
remainder of your schooling. Anyway, look it up. With that, it includes a guaranteed job upon graduation, including internship every summer while I was in school,
Paid
and so
internships?
paid internship, beautiful apartment, like in the city. It was nuts. Like when I think back on it, I'm like, man,
Free school, money every summer. You
it's
got the
insane.
car. You were living. You were
But let
living.
me
You didn't
tell
even know it.
you, I didn't even know it. And let me tell you how much I didn't know it. I graduated flat, broke, and in debt. And it's like I had so much money coming
How?
in.
How, Kendra?
How? Because no one ever talked to me about like not just living for today. Like I didn't ever really consider saving, investing. Those weren't conversations that I had growing up. Like
Okay. So
and I just saw money as like something that just was going to always be there.
so I mean, did they catch you at the college campus credit cards? Is that what it was? How'd you get
No,
in debt?
my parents set up credit cards for me
Okay.
and they would pay them and stuff like that. Like a kind of an allowance, like you can spend this much, but I would spend like over that amount. Or, when I finished school, I was living above my means. I
Okay.
don't know. Like no one ever really explained to me the impact your credit score will have years down the road. I'm thinking like,
Mm.
I'll get better one day. But it's crazy because when I finally bought my first house, when you're getting a mortgage, they're looking at your credit
That
score, all that
income
kind
to
of
debt
stuff.
ratio.
That credit score it's still costing me today because that very first mortgage that we got, we still have that mortgage because we have it's a rental property now.
Okay.
And I'm like thinking about all the clothes I bought back in the day on those credit cards that made my credit score bad
That's out of
when I
style now.
well,
You can't.
it was out of style, right? But I always say that those are the most expensive clothes in the world because I'm still paying for them. And
Mm.
that's something that no one ever told me. And so, yeah, I finished undergrad, went to grad school, and then I started working as an international economist. And so I wasn't working on a farm. I was actually working in an office building. I was traveling the world, but I hated my 9 to 5 job. Like
Wow.
the 9 to 5 life, like just like the hierarchy and all the politics and office politics and stuff in the government just wasn't for me. But I didn't know how to get out of it. I'm like, okay, I'm checking the boxes. I've gone to school. I got me a good government job. I met my husband. We, got married, bought a house.
Met him at school or at the government job?
I met him at the government job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's a
He was
military brat too.
oh, so he had the same background. It was kind of like you started checking all these boxes with
Yeah.
similarities.
Yeah. And then we're like, okay, we bought a house. Like we've arrived. Like that's all that I kind of really thought of or knew.
Wow. So I mean,
Yeah.
with that said, I guess at what point? Well, firstly, growing up, what did you even want to be?
I didn't know. For a while, I thought I wanted to be like an interpreter and like interpret Spanish for people. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't know. And I used to feel bad back then. But now, I'm so glad that we're like shifting how we talk to our kids because I'm like, people are like in their 40s and don't know what they want to be. We're
Facts.
always evolving. And so that pressure to know what you want to do when you don't even know yourself. I did not
True.
even know who I was as a person.
True.
So I thought I wanted to be an interpreter. I got the scholarship and I was like, I can do this. But halfway through grad school, I actually tried to drop out. My mom wouldn't let me.
Take that
because
car back.
Yeah, she was like, no, like she didn't speak to me. She did not speak to me for a whole week, like literally silent treatment. And Like, how could you give up this opportunity? You have a full ride to like one of the best schools for what you're doing. And I wanted to drop out so that I could go work at an international civil rights museum. I've
Oh,
always been
wow.
really passionate about like Black history, civil rights. And that was something that I felt like, let me do this instead. And she was like, are you crazy? Like you have this opportunity. And so I'm glad I did stick it out and like finish grad school. But I knew then like there was this inkling that the route that I was going down just wasn't for me, but it felt like what I was supposed to do to like live up to this American dream, right?
Oh, yeah. A lot of pressure everyone's under. But now, in regards to you and your husband, you meet, you get married, you get the house, and you start thinking about real estate. Like, what kind of brought you to that epiphany for both of you that this is what you need to do and get into?
Yeah, we had never thought about it. Like we bought that house and we're like, cool, this is the house we'll live in forever. Like we didn't even real estate investing was never a thought, but we went and played we went to a game night at my aunt's house
Hmm.
and she had the game called Cash Flow.
Hmm.
And Cash Flow is like Monopoly kind of, but it kind of mimics life
Like
a
on
lot.
steroids.
Yeah, you played it?
I haven't played it, but I heard about it a little bit. But explain it a little bit more because Monopoly already seems like a great game people get addicted to. So, what is cash flow?
It's crazy because I don't even like Monopoly. And so, and to think that I love
It's a
cash flow
long
is
game.
crazy. It's so long, but cash flow is different because you have to invest in order to live your dream. And so basically the premise is in order to be financially free, where you can do whatever you want, like whatever your dream life is, your passive income has to be greater than your expenses. And
Mm,
so you have to get to a point where you're not living paycheck to paycheck. You're not burdened by debt and student loan debt. The only way to win is to invest. And what I found was in playing that game, you can invest in businesses, you can invest in stocks, you can invest in like gold. You cannot win without real estate. There was
wow.
no way to ever win the game if you don't have real estate. And so we played that and we're like, okay, so if this game is like life and you can't win this fictitious game without investing
Without
in real
real
estate,
estate.
then we're not winning in real life. Like we need to actually win in life. And so it opened up our eyes there.
I'm kind of curious. What happens if you lose in the game? I mean, Monopoly, you go to jail, you lose your money, you know. What happens if you lose in cash flow?
You just keep going around the rat race. You're like
Okay.
literally in this rat race, like this hamster wheel, and you just keep going around and around. That's it. You don't get to live your dream.
So, I mean, I got to ask out the gate now, going into the idea of a first investment, it sounds like you and your husband did this together. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Like, did you go in as co-owners to this?
We did, and we were both thankfully because I know it's not the same for all couples. Like
Hmm.
some might have the vision and some might not. It might take a while for them to catch up. But we literally played cash flow on like a Saturday. On Monday, we were looking at properties. We're like all in. We didn't even know what we were doing. We're like, we're just gonna go get a property. And so like 3 months later, we bought our first duplex in
Wow.
Washington, DC. Mm-hmm.
Wow. 3 months later.
Yeah, it's
And at this
nuts.
time, you were living in the DMV area, or where did you buy your house?
In
At that
Southeast DC.
Southeast DC. So
Mm-hmm.
you staying in the DMV. It's a little bit close to kind of where you spent the most of your life, right? Or at least for a
Yeah.
longer extended period of time. And
Mm-hmm.
how do you go to the decision to then make a second one? Before we even go there, when do you realize like what looks good in regards to just return on investment? Because I think everyone kind of thinks, hey, I want to jump into this, I want to do more. But how do you even determine for yourself what looks good as ROI?
We had no idea at that point. Literally, we were like, the duplex, the mortgage was like $1,025 a month.
Okay.
And since it was 2 units, right? Like we already had a tenant in one side. We inherited a tenant with it. And I think he was paying like $1,100. So we're like,
So he
we're
covered
kind
the
of,
mortgage.
yeah, we're like, so that's good, right? Like we're breaking even. There's so many other expenses though to
Mm,
consider, but we're like, we'll just take our time and we'll just get another tenant in the other unit. It needed like some cosmetic repairs. And so my
okay.
husband's on YouTube. We're like there every night, like after work, we're like ordering pizza, sitting on the floor, trying to figure out like how to do tile and all that stuff. Um,
Wow.
7 days after we got that property, the tenant that we inherited, he just left. Like he didn't give us a warning. He just moved out. And we're
I mean,
like,
when you inherit someone, do they automatically fall on a lease or it's no lease at that point? Like, how does that part work?
Yeah, you inherit the lease as well, but his
Uh,
lease was basically month to month. And so, I mean, he still should have given us warning,
yeah.
but we didn't know any of this stuff. We didn't even know to look at the lease before we bought it. We didn't know any of the right questions to ask. And so he left and we're like, how do we even find tenants? Like, where do we even find a lease
But he
to
had every
draft up
right.
our?
He had every right to leave. He was on month to month, so he was good. No
Yeah.
legal ramifications.
Well, no, he still should have given us a notice
Yeah,
and he
got
didn't.
it. Got it.
Yeah, and he left the place so terribly. Like we kept his deposit. The place was a hot mess.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, we're just like, what do we do? And so we ended up, I convinced my husband to try putting it on Airbnb. And he was
Okay.
like, no one's gonna want to stay here. This is Southeast DC in like 2014.
So
Yeah,
so paint the landscape. What does Southeast DC is this hood at this point, or
oh
is it?
yeah.
Yeah.
What people would call hood, yeah. And
Yeah.
it was like the neighborhood nobody wanted to go in, right?
Got it.
Our family, we lived in Southeast. Our house was like a mile away from this rental. Our own family was like, they didn't want to come
We
visit
not coming to
us.
see
Like,
you.
and when we bought the property, they were just like, what are y'all thinking? Like, this is
Wow.
crazy. Like,
Wow.
it's dangerous. No one wants to come here. Now that's one of the most sought after neighborhoods in DC.
So
Like
you
the
caught it at the
way
right
gentrification,
time.
yeah, you got to have that vision. And like, I feel like Black people were the last to see the vision in our own communities.
Yes.
Everyone
Yes.
from the outside can see the vision. They're willing to wait it out. And we're always like, no, it's too hood, it's this and that. And it's like, usually those are like the gems. Those are the
Mm.
parts of town that have the best views, and like the best location, right? And people are like,
I mean,
but now it's
it's like Park Slope, Brooklyn. People bought houses for 15 grand in like the 80s, and now it's
yep.
like a million, 2 million, 3 million.
Exactly. It always comes back around
Yes.
and it's just interesting. So you got to be able to like have that foresight.
Now I want to ask something too because I'm kind of curious. You locked in at that point. You got a new tenant after. I'm assuming that's probably how it goes, right? And then obviously at that time rentals were probably going for much less. How
Yeah.
does it work for you in a situation where there is just the neighborhood changes, rents are increasing? How do you turn around to a tenant and raise their rent?
Yeah, you can only increase it, and every city is different, but you can
Okay.
only increase it by a certain percentage each year. And
Oh,
so you can't just turn around and like charge the tenant triple,
got it.
but you can put a new tenant in it if you wanted to get rid of the old one. We didn't.
How do you do that though? How do you casually kind of get rid of someone that's there?
I mean, I don't know. You could say like, "Hey, I really don't know because we didn't do it."
Okay, okay,
but
okay.
but but also like in DC, like say you needed to evict a tenant because they're not paying or whatever. It's really really hard to evict somebody in DC, New York, places that
Yeah.
are very tenant friendly. It is extremely hard, even if they're not paying, even if they're like breaking all the rules.
Wow.
The tenant friendly cities are like really tough. So thankfully, we've never had to formally evict any tenants.
Okay.
We do like on some of our rentals, we rented to Section 8 tenants.
Okay.
And so we have had to put tenants out. But like with Section 8, for instance, because they're on a voucher, if they get evicted, they're going to lose their voucher. And so it's really easier to just work with their case manager and say, hey, this isn't working out. Can you relocate
Oh.
them?
Oh
And
wow.
so
So
we've
they'll
had
kind
to
of hook
put
it up for
tenants
you.
out. Yeah. So we put tenants out for sure, but we've never been through like a formal legal eviction, thank God, because it's a lot.
Okay. Okay. So now I definitely want to understand the process of you going into your next property. How did that work out for you after? And again, kind of, I want to go back to what looked good for you, where you realized this is something we could really do and keep going with.
Yeah, that duplex, when we put it on Airbnb, we started making like $3,000 or $4,000 a month. And remember, the mortgage was about 1,025, and we're just like, wait a minute, this money is so good. Like we
Wow.
should do this again. This is nuts, right? And so we were just making like 3 or 4 thousand on one unit. That's not even counting. It was a duplex, so there's two
Yeah.
units.
Yeah.
So we're
Ooh.
like, this is crazy. And so,
So we
of
talking
course,
really like 4 8 grand a month from this
yeah.
duplex.
So we only did one side on
Okay.
Airbnb, and
Okay.
then we have a long term tenant, but still we're making like about $5,000 a
Exactly.
month on average, and we're like, this is nuts. Like we should do this again, right? Nuts in a good way. And so we start looking at properties, but we're trying to figure out like, okay, how do we even? Oh, let me tell you this. So the down payment for that property was $57,000, like as in 5-7. And we didn't even have that money because we hadn't been saving for it. And so we ended up having to take a loan from our retirement accounts to afford the down payment, which is it's a solid strategy.
And you pay yourself back at the end of the day.
Pay yourself, yeah. So definitely, this is not financial or legal advice for anyone listening. You can definitely consult with a financial advisor, but it worked out beautifully for us. But we were like tapped out. We're like, well, how do we find the money for another property in DC? Because DC is like relatively expensive even back then.
Yeah.
So we started looking at properties and we're like, maybe we should go in with a family member. Okay. That didn't work out. And then we found out about what's called house hacking, which is what changed the game for us because it really allows you to get a rental property and a primary residence all in one. And it like lowers that down payment significantly. So, you know, if you're buying a rental property and you go to get a mortgage, you got to put 25% down. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But if you're buying a house that you're going to live in, the down payment could be 3%, 3.5%, 5%, 10%. It's much lower.
Is it a form of an FHA loan or?
We got an FHA loan. So you can house hack with any conventional loan or FHA, but we ended up, so house hacking is basically buying a multi-unit property, living in one unit and then renting out the other units. And that way, that down payment hurdle is eliminated because you're going to live in it. So we were able to use FHA and we bought a 4-unit apartment building and the down payment was like, I don't know, I think it was like $17,000, which was way less than our duplex. And we got a way bigger property and we were able to live there, which eliminated our living expenses because the tenants are paying, tenants are paying for the mortgage. And it was one of those things.
Did you sell your house?
No, we rented that out too.
Oh, nice.
Rented out the single family. We were renting out the duplex. We moved into the 4-unit. We lived in 1 unit, rented out the other 3. There were Section 8 tenants and all that. And we could not have planned this, but 6 months after we moved into that 4-unit building, the area just like gentrified like crazy. And the Section 8 rental rates, they're set by the city, right?
Yeah.
And 6 months after, they just doubled the rents. Like,
oh wow,
yeah.
You didn't even have to ask. You didn't have to speak to any case manager.
No,
I think so many people are scared of renting to Section 8, but you're giving a lot of pros today on why to do it.
Yeah, it's guaranteed money unless the world is literally crumbling. I mean, you're basically going to get paid if you can pass the Section 8 inspections. So I do like it for that. Like I said. You might be able to avoid evictions by working with case managers. Section 8 tenants are not all bad. There's a huge misconception. Oh, the other thing I want to say too is like Section 8 is one type of voucher program, but there are several others. There are vouchers for like disabled veterans. So you might see like a lot of single males that used to be in the military that are disabled and they're not even all in a wheelchair. I mean, disabled comes in many forms.
Yes.
There are programs for previously like homeless individuals and things like that. And so Section 8 is just one program. But you can get a bad tenant anywhere. Like Section 8 is not just a bunch of bad tenants. It's not like that.
I want to hear though, still, what has been your worst case that has happened? Did you ever have anyone trapping out the apartment, like try to turn it into something more than it was?
No, I never had anybody trapping it out, but I did have somebody who had the police come knocking on the door. They're about to break the main door down to try to get into the building to get to that unit. I have had
like a dispute was going on or something like that.
I think he had been affiliated with some illegal activity and they were coming to search some
Check
stuff.
It out.
It was crazy. The crazier part is because I lived there, I was home that day. The police are like beating in the door. So I come to the door and I'm like, I will open this door for you. I will open, like, don't break my door. I'm the owner. Like, I don't want to have to replace these doors. They didn't believe I was the owner.
You serious?
Yeah, they really didn't. So I had to go in my file cabinet.
The neighborhood got too nice?
Got it, right?
And that's what it
like,
was?
I think it's like also seeing a young Black woman owning a 4-unit building. It's just kind of unbelievable to some people.
New.
So I literally had to go to my file cabinet and get out the deed for the property and show them. And they were like, let me see some ID. That wasn't even enough. So then I had to get my ID. Like, this is my name. This is my name. Then they were like, well, where's your husband? My husband was at work. I had to call
Yeah.
my husband. He had to come
Yo,
home
my name's
to,
on the deed. You got my picture.
and his name was on there too. So they wanted, mine was not
Are you
enough, right?
serious?
Had to call my husband. He had to come home
Crazy.
to convince these police officers
Crazy.
that we own the building. It was nuts. But anyway, another crazy tenant story I'll say is a guy who was like letting his family stay there, and he was really staying. So people like
So
you
you
use
subletting
their
it?
voucher.
Oh, with
Yeah,
the
he
Section
was.
8? So he
Yeah, and they were like stealing my packages. It was crazy. So those are some stories.
I mean, would you recommend living in the same place as, especially, and let's face it, like there are misconceptions about Section 8. You decided not only to go Section 8, but you decide I'm going to live there with them.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, it gets a little uncomfortable because you're
Mm-hmm.
literally sharing walls with your tenants, but also because we had to put some people out. I'm like, they know where we
They might
live.
come back.
They didn't. We're
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
But one thing that I will say is a lot of people who house hack will kind of put a barrier up by not letting the tenants know that they're the owner. They could
Yeah.
pretend as if they're a tenant. They hire a property management company. That's not what we did, and we're fine. But I do know some people who will just kind of put that barrier up and say like, "I'm just a live-in property manager," or "I'm a tenant," like,
Yeah. Yeah. Just
and
like
not
you.
even, yeah, not even
Screw
cross
that
that line.
landlord.
So it's like, yeah,
Landlord
yeah,
sucks.
he's the
Yeah. Yeah.
worst. Yeah.
Yeah. That's silly. So no, I mean that's dope because at that point I'm counting up the units. You got like 6, 7 things happening right there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
at that point, I'm assuming it's addictive, and you just want to keep doing it.
It
Is
is. Yeah, we were making a lot of money.
yeah. And at that point, at what point did you decide it was time to retire from the 9 to 5 world? And at which property did you get to that point where it was actually a option?
Yeah, I think as soon as we were making money on that duplex, I was ready to go. And my husband was like, pump your brakes. Like, let's like do this for a few more years. So I think living in that 4 unit is what got us to financial freedom. We were making a lot of money because it
Yeah.
was Section 8 rent. They were paying like the top of the market rent. 1 unit in that building was renting for like $4,000 a month. And this is why I say to people, it's so important to remember like the market that you're in, because a 4 unit building in DC is going to make a lot more money than a 4 unit building in Detroit. A 4 unit building in New York is going to make a lot more money than a 4 unit building in DC. And so I think with social media, it's great because we have so much information, but it's easy to compare our stories to others. Like, well, Kendra said she was making that much. If I'm not making that much, I'm not successful. Or Kendra was able to do it with this many properties. The number of properties doesn't matter. None of that matters. What matters first and foremost is what your financial goals are and how many properties it will take for you where you are to get there. Like if
Got it.
you're in Ohio, you might need XYZ number of units to be financially free, right? If you're in New York, you might only need one. I don't,
Okay. Okay.
and that's what I want people to remember.
I mean, all right. So I want to get into the key resource, right?
Okay.
Because it's kind of interesting because you learned enough by yourself. Sounds like trial and error, right?
Yeah.
First, you didn't even know about the house hack the first time around, right?
Mm-mm.
So now, what got you to the point where you wanted to make the key resource, and what does that mean to you nowadays?
Yeah. So when we bought the 4 unit building, I posted on Facebook just to my Facebook friends. I had no online presence like as the key resource. I was like, hey, we just bought a 4 unit building. And people started DMing me like, did you
How?
guys rob a bank? Like,
Houseway.
how did you
Houseway.
get like how are y'all doing this? This is your third property. And they're just like, what are y'all doing? And so I realized there was a gap in information. Like people needed to see themselves represented because back then, when you talk about real estate education, there were no podcasts like yours that were featuring people like me, right?
Mm-hmm.
You had to go to like those hotels where they had these free seminars. A bunch of old white men would try to sell you something at the
That's
end that
so
cost
true.
like 30,000, right?
That's so
Now the
true.
face of real estate looks so different. And so I was like, okay, let me be what I feel like I needed. There's no
Okay.
reason that I made all these mistakes just for someone else to make them, especially people that come across me online. So I was like, let me start sharing. And it just grew from there. And I'm just so humbled and like blessed to be able to impact other people's lives based on what I've done. It's crazy.
No, 100%. So, I mean, what is the focus? Like, how do you, Are you doing online classes? What is the process typically that people expect from that?
Yeah, I started out doing lots of online classes, webinars, ebooks, like all the resources. I post a lot of like free game on social media too. But then I started saying like, okay, what I do is pretty, it's not unique, but like how I invest in real estate is not how someone else might invest in real estate. And so as other young Black investors start sharing their stories, I'm like, let's team up. Like, I've never flipped a property. Like, I don't
Yeah.
flip properties, right?
Okay.
But
Okay.
people need to hear about that. And so then I started trying to shine a light on other people's stories. And that's how I got into like writing this book. So the book is what I'm focused on now. I'm not really doing classes and things like that right now,
Okay.
but I'm putting like everything into this book.
Is the name of the book out yet, or like is the name?
Yes.
What's the name
The
of it?
book, yeah, it's titled Acres, and
Okay.
it's
Ooh,
basically paying homage to the 40 acres and a
the
mule, the
mule.
elusive promise that was never
We gotta
realized.
get those 40 acres ourselves.
Right, we are, and that's the point.
Yeah.
See,
I
you
got
got
it. I
it.
got
We're
you.
out here getting it on our own, despite all the barriers and roadblocks.
Yes.
And so, my goal is to really shine a light on the stories of young Black real estate investors who are building wealth from the ground up, like from
Nice.
homelessness, from six figures of like debt and things like that,
Wow.
student
Wow.
loan debt, consumer debt. Like these people are out here killing it. They have way
Wow.
more properties than I do. Like they're out here just
Yeah.
doing the thing. And I'm like, I feel like this is Black history.
Of
Like
course.
this is Black history.
So how are you doing it? Are you doing a bunch of interviews and kind of taking that information and putting it together? Okay.
Exactly. I did
Okay.
interviews and then I got the interviews transcribed. And then I basically summarized everything into like a beautiful story. So it's a coffee table book. It's like
Okay.
really heavy on beautiful imagery. And it's actually a really heavy book too. Like it's something that you would want to display.
Okay.
Remember back in the day, there was those, we had all those encyclopedias.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
that's how Acres is going to be. This is the
Okay.
first of many volumes because I feel like there's
Ah.
so many stories to tell, right?
Nice.
So in this one, I'm only highlighting 25 people, but there's like hundreds and hundreds of people that I could
Wow.
highlight
You
with
said
all
only
different.
25.
Yeah, I'm saying only because,
Only
man, I could think
25.
of like at least 70 more people
Wow.
right now that I could tell their stories to. And so I'm just super excited because I feel like this is going to change the game. Like there's going to be someone who looks at these stories, sees themselves reflected and say, oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
Like
100%.
this person came from X, Y, I can do that. And that's the truth. And so that's why I'm super excited about it.
Now, I'm going to go and say, in regards to just startup costs that are associated and just even income debt ratio, people, there are going to be people out there, listeners, that say, well, I didn't have that blessing. I went to school. I have Sally Mae on my
Yes.
neck. I owed them 120 grand. Still, I'm paying it down and it's not going away. Do you feel like you had I mean, obviously you had an advantage to that, but what do you say to those
I did.
people that are in those situations and feel that they can't start because of their debt?
Exactly why I'm doing the book. There's a couple in the book who had six figures of student loan debt each, and
Mm,
they have more rental properties than I do now.
wow.
And they started from the courses that I taught. Like, and so one,
Really?
it's possible. Yes, they started out taking my courses and now they've like literally surpassed me. And I think it's a beautiful, a beautiful thing. So, but what I was going to say is some people will invest literally to pay their debt. So I'm buying a
Mm,
property and that property is going to pay Sally Mae for me. And that's exactly what they did. And so it's definitely possible. One thing you guys can think of is, like I said, thinking about how expensive it is to buy a rental property. You can use your home as that first investment, right? So buying a home is so much cheaper. If you're a first time home buyer, there's so many grants out there. You can literally
hmm
buy a home with 0% down, live in that home for a while, turn it into a rental property,
hmm
keep doing that over and over, like using that primary
Okay.
residence to kind of give you that leg in the door and then turn it
Okay.
into a rental and keep going.
I,
That's one
I,
way to do it. Yeah.
I like that idea. I mean, for myself, I feel like I bought my first property and I didn't even know about house hacking, right? And I probably
Yeah.
would have house hacked had I known. Now I feel like I'm at the point though. I have too many children to kind of house hack and find an apartment that'll fit my entire family. So
Facts. Having kids changes the whole
it
thing.
changes the game. And you're
Kids
a
are
mother now too,
loud.
right?
Kids are so loud, man. I need to apologize to one of my old tenants in that house hack because she lived above us and she had kids. And I would be
You
like,
stopped her.
I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so disrespectful. They're so loud. And she was like, they're just being kids. Now I
Now,
understand. And I literally want to email her and be like, girl, I'm so
my
sorry.
bad. Because you're a mother now too.
Yeah, and I honestly had no idea. But what? So how did you get into real? I'm like interviewing you on your own
No,
show. How did you get?
no. I mean, really, it's me saying, all right, I have my first home. We live in it. It's our home. Let's
Yeah.
do something else. Have tenants there. But now it's like, okay, we understand that process, and now it's something that's familiar.
Mm-hmm.
When I say we, it's my wife and I. We understand that process, and
Yeah.
what do we do next? You know, because there's a part of me, and I heard that we ain't talk about this yet, but I know you also have a condo. So in my head, I've kind of even thought about the idea. Do I buy a condo next? Do I rent that out?
Yeah.
And then one of my thoughts has been, do I buy a condo that I could live in later on in life? That way my houses
Yeah.
are for my children, right? But the condo might be for us.
I love
So,
that.
so I'm going to ask you even there, because this is, again, my curiosity. What do you think about the idea of buying a property now that you see yourself retiring in? Or is that usually a bad idea for people? And when you're investing, you shouldn't even think that way?
I hadn't even thought about that. I think that's dope. I know an investor who says she never buys a property that she wouldn't live in herself. So if she
Okay.
lost everything, she knows she could live in one of her properties, and it's not something she'd be like, "Oh, I can't." It's not. So that's how she invests. Condos are tricky though. That's one thing
Yeah.
I'll say. Like, if it wasn't for the deal we got on this condo, I don't know if we would have bought it because there's so many restrictions. So I would say I think it's a great idea to buy a property now that you could have like later, but renting that condo out in the in between time could be really, could be a
Yeah,
headache.
yeah, that's the part that I'm thinking about. But then even like my mind is going through different things. I mean, I got my nephew King in the building today. He's investing in properties in Houston, and he's has
Love
like the
it.
idea with the nurses in the area of the hospitals, et
Yes.
cetera. So, I mean, I'm thinking about even those different places and how do you even pick the cities? Like, if I'm going to throw you a question right here too. Right now, in the state that we're in, present
Hmm.
day, what are the top three cities that you see for investing? If you could throw that out there.
Oh man. First of all, any city with a military base for me is going to be a win because you
Okay.
have a really great pool of renters. But I love like Baltimore right now,
Hmm.
Detroit. Like those two cities are
I
really
heard Detroit is on
affordable.
the come up right now too. Like Detroit is building
Yeah.
up.
And it's really getting to a place where it's not even as affordable as it used to be, but it's still
Okay.
relatively. So I think those are the two that come to top of mind. I actually read a list the other day of like the top cities for 2022, and there were some weird cities on there. I'm like, what is this?
I mean, we
But
have
for
like Phoenix is coming up and like places like
Phoenix,
Vegas. Like there's a lot of city. Salt Lake City, I heard is on the up and up. So
hmm
it's I think everyone has different ideas of where next, but then there's also this
yeah,
feeling of, do I want to invest somewhere that I can touch? Meaning that, hey, I'm in New York, the DMV is not a bad drive, right? Is that
yes,
how much do you take that into consideration? You did mention you're in Texas now, right?
I am. We moved here to be closer to family, but to your point, like I feel like it's best if you can invest in a city that you have some knowledge of. Like even if you never lived there, you got family there, you visited. But honestly, I know investors who are killing it, who are investing in cities they've never even been to. I
Mm,
know people who have several properties in cities they have never stepped foot in. Like
wow.
the whole thing is remote. And
They just
this is
heard it was
why
good.
literally the numbers, like they're in California, the city is maybe Cincinnati, Ohio, and they're like the numbers just work. So they build a
Wow.
team remotely, and they are killing it. I know a couple in California who has properties in North Carolina. They ain't
They
never been in
didn't
North
even
Carolina.
fly. Wow.
Didn't even. Isn't that so? That's what I'm
They're like,
saying.
send me a
Like
video.
literally, and they're actually in the book. Like their story
Okay.
is remarkable, and that's why it's so important for me to highlight different people's stories because everybody is approaching it differently, and I think there's room to win in so many different ways.
Okay.
It's just really cool.
Now I'm going to ask you something, and it's because you're investing. It sounds like, are all the deals with your husband? Is this a joint venture for every property?
Yes,
It
it
is now.
is.
Some people, I mean, feel like nervous with that, right? Granted, like love is love, right? And then mixing business, it's just the case of, well, what happens if something happens later on where this is not the scenario? What has been your take on that? And do you know anyone who's had a experience going into spouse?
Yeah, so we invest in everything. And I always forget, like, because my husband's not part of like the key resource, and so people never see him. I'm like, oh yeah. So I don't know if
Yeah.
they know we
I mean,
invest together.
he's like Kareem Biggs Burke. He's like the silent partner over there in the background somewhere.
Literally, like he doesn't do social media. He's like a real behind
Mhm.
the scenes guy, but we always invest together. I do know some people who like their husbands don't invest with them, and they're just like, yeah, do what you do, and they're like out there, they're married, but the women are they're the investors, right? They're
Oh
out there
wow.
doing all this stuff, and I think that's really dope too.
Wow.
But yeah, we invest together, and we're not really worried about, I guess, the worst case scenarios. We haven't really thought about it, but
I mean,
like we have an estate plan, and so
okay.
that's really important. But
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
Yes. I mean, you know, I think it's just these are some of the cautions or some of the things that people think of. And
yes,
honestly, they become barriers for people, right? Because they don't
yeah,
know whether or not they should do it with their spouse, if it's okay for them to just make these individual moves without. So it comes
yeah.
up, right? So, I
Mhm.
mean, even for you, you mentioned that, you know, people that have, you know, dozens of properties. Do you have a goal of where you need to get to or want to be? What's the future looking like for you in investing?
Yeah, so we like reached financial freedom to where our passive income does cover our expenses, but I still want to try more things. Like we moved to San Antonio right before the pandemic, and
Mm,
so that with having a new baby in a new city, like we just for the first year we were here, we were on lockdown mostly.
yeah, yeah.
It was crazy. So now that we're getting our footing, one thing that I want to branch into is shipping container homes, and
Oh,
so
I'm
are
Instagram
you
hooks me
there?
onto those. I'm not.
Right.
I just keep seeing them. They keep popping up on my feed. The algorithm caught me, and they're like the dopest things ever in the world to me.
Aren't they
But
so cool? The
where are they
algorithm caught you.
popular?
I don't know. I feel like they're popular everywhere, but not
Everywhere.
all cities allow them. Like your city has
Uh,
to allow it, and then the land has to be zoned for it. And so right now I'm looking at land, the
nice.
perfect piece of land, and I want to like start that. So we're also like investing in stocks really heavy now. We're investing in like real estate investment trust as well, which I love. And so here's the answer though. The next phase for us, because we did that like hard, nitty gritty living with our tenants, like that hard work. And so now we're looking at like more passive,
Yes.
my husband's like, I don't want to be, renovate any more properties on you off YouTube. Like he's not really trying to do
Got
a
it.
whole bunch of stuff. So we're looking for that easy money now that we've
Yes.
done all the hard work up.
Now, I mean, in regards to international, I mean, you mentioned you have friends that are investing in cities they've never seen. Is international part of the future for you too, investing internationally?
We've thought about it actually, but we would have to do a lot of like visiting and traveling and getting comfortable. And I don't know anyone who has rental properties overseas, but it's not out of the question.
Got it. Now, I mean, out of, you know, you have 25 people that you've interviewed for this book that you're in the process of. Um,
Hmm.
can you give us just some of like, I'd say one of your favorite stories, just a little bit about it, like a little bit of an excerpt, something that was different than what you mentioned already?
Yes. So there's a couple in the book who was making like $40,000 a day at one point. They were investing in real estate, flipping houses and wholesaling before the crash, before the real estate crash. So they were like, they hadn't seen that much money before. They were from the hood. They went to the bank, took out all this money, spread it out on their bed, jumping up like you see in the movies, like throwing it in the air.
They did the money phone.
Literally money phone. They went and bought three cars, all the same car, three different colors, just because the real estate market crashed. They lost everything. They were
Ooh,
homeless. And they went from homelessness to now they have like a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. So they lost it all. And then I was like, why'd y'all even try again? Like I'd be so done. But their story is so remarkable.
they're
So
like
that's
real estate rappers. They had
yes,
that first hit and they went crazy.
they went crazy, lost it all, learned some hard lessons, and they came back even stronger.
Wow. And now they're good. They're part of the book. How long is this book supposed to be?
I think it's going to be like 140 pages, but it's a lot of pictures because it's a coffee
Okay.
table book. So it's
Got it.
like it's really heavy on imagery, but there are stories there too. So it's inspirational, it's educational, and it's available for pre-order now, but it's not going to
Okay.
ship until the summer. So yeah,
Okay.
it's
No,
going to
that's
be
dope.
dope. Yeah.
Where is it directly on your website? How do people even?
It's only on my website because I self-published it. Like
Oh, you
I've been working on
self-published?
this. Yes, I've been working on this for over 2 years. So it's
I
been
was
a
going to
lot.
ask that. I was going to ask that part if you had publishing lined up, and no, it's self-published.
I self-published this thing. I've done everything, every aspect of it. And it's you can go to getyouracres.com. Getyouracres.com is where it's at. But yeah, did it
Not,
all myself.
now, I mean, investment is definitely that's your area, but I mean, going into this route, I have to ask, what is the process to even decide you're going to self-publish, and how does that work?
I really wanted ownership of it because there's there's no book like this. There is no coffee table book about
Uh,
young Black real estate investors. And I felt like going with a publishing company, I would have to convince them of too much. I would
mm,
lose too much of like the ownership of how I wanted it to look. And I feel like I needed proof of concept. Like I need to get this out into the world, and then people will believe it, and then I can do it again and again. And maybe I'll go with a publisher next time. But I feel like I got this thing on lock now. Like now that I've been through this problem, like I can do it again now, and I have more ownership of everything this way.
I mean, would you become a publisher for others, or is that?
I had never thought about that, but thanks for for planting that seed.
I mean, another part of another revenue source, right? Another
I
revenue
love
stream.
it. I love multiple streams of income. So that's dope.
Exactly. So I mean, it has to there has to be different people. I mean, obviously you said the seminars were the thing in the past. Who do you look to for inspiration that and who has mentored you or even sponsored you to the point that you're able to pick up the phone and call them and get kind of tricks of the trade?
So many people, like my friends in Baltimore, the Charm City buyers, they're
Mm.
like, oh my gosh, they own like half of Baltimore at this point.
Wow.
So they're really great. Deandra McDonald, she's awesome. She's killing it in Virginia. Petway Estates, like you can look these people up on Instagram. They are just so inspirational to me. So, and they're all like internet friends, people I've met, and we've like we have traveled together. We've like they went to my baby shower and everything like that. So these are really dope people who are like killing it in the industry, and that's just a few.
Now, the one thing I want to understand is definitely you have this financial freedom now, but what I'm sure it came with a lot of different sacrifice. Obviously, you did the house hack. Are there things that nowadays you still feel like you're sacrificing things because you're so heavily focused on investing? Are there things that you miss? Did you used to travel more before this? Like, where have some of your funds gone or kind of been changed around on what you spend?
Yeah, and we did used to travel more. And I think the only reason we're not really traveling now is because the pandemic and the
Well, true.
baby, trying to keep her safe. But a lot of people don't know that we are actually still a one car household. We only have one
The
car.
Corolla?
No,
I would have loved it if you still had that Corolla.
that would be hilarious.
It would have been like
Okay.
Kawhi Leonard. Get some water.
Now, my husband probably would like that idea because
Oh
he's
yeah.
very frugal.
Oh
He's
wow.
very frugal, but we had only one car in DC, which made sense because we took the
Okay.
metro,
The
took the bus
trains
to
and
work and stuff. Moved to Texas, and I'm thinking we'll probably get two cars. But
a
honestly,
pickup
with the
truck.
pandemic, we won't be going nowhere. Like
Okay.
we literally be in the house, and so we only have one car, and so
Wow.
our expenses are just very low. Like we paid for our house in cash. We
Wow.
only have one car. Like so our expenses are just super
And I'm
low.
assuming it's a humble car.
It's a
You're not
Hyundai,
okay. You're not driving a Maybach.
Hyundai.
Hyundai.
No, it's a
Hyundai. Yeah.
Hyundai
Yeah. Yeah.
Palisade, and I
Oh,
love
okay.
it though. Like I feel
That's a
like
beautiful truck.
it's for what it is. It's like it feels very luxury, but
Yes.
without the luxury price tag. And so
Yes.
I brag about my little Hyundai, the little Palisade. I am not too shamed.
So I mean, what do you guys do for fun? Because it sounds like you're not traveling right now, right? You're not driving around the city. So what are you doing for fun? And most importantly, what are you doing for just self-care?
I struggle with that. We
Mm,
have a 2.5-year-old, and we're like basically homeschooling her.
wow.
And so we've been trying to like get out there and meet people and stuff like that, but it's been really hard. And so
Yeah.
I was just talking to my mom the other day, like I'm still trying to find myself as a new mom
Yeah.
in a new city. in a pandemic, like people's circles are very close. And
Yes.
so what do we do for fun? I'm still trying to figure that out. Self-care is me sitting in the car, like eating Chick-fil-A by myself and not telling anybody and not sharing with
And
anybody.
not bringing it for anyone.
That's what I do for self-care. Yes.
That's cool. I mean, you found a way. You found something that keeps you sane for a second right there every day.
Mm-hmm.
But not
Yeah.
every day. Not every day.
Well, no, not every day. Oh, yeah, not every day. But
So when I guess one of the last days I'll ask you, when are you gonna stop moving? Army brats all over the place. When do you stop moving?
that's what my friends are asking because they're like, you move too much. We've been doing the most, but we actually are thinking about moving somewhere else in the near future. Like really, because
Somewhere with more
the tax
trains.
incentives. No, we've really been thinking about Puerto Rico, to
Oh
be honest.
wow.
Yeah,
See,
so
I was somewhere when I said international, but it was more for you. It's not even an investment. It's about you moving there.
yeah, it's there's so many benefits, like tax wise and stuff like that. So we've been thinking about that, and it'd just be really cool to live there.
With Puerto Rico, it's not about investments, actually you being there.
It's about investment. So a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
most of our moves are going to be investment minded, but I mean, Puerto Rico would just be really cool to live there too, right? Like,
True.
but
True.
it is definitely about investment in the end. We got a master plan.
So I guess, and let me know, everywhere that you move to, after you leave, are you going to rent it out? Is that the plan?
That's the plan. Yep. Yep.
Uh, and what's the strategic part about that? Is there anything benefits that you get from doing it that way as opposed to just buying it and never living there?
Yeah, buying it as a primary residence first, like if we get a mortgage, it'd just be cheaper to do. Like you get a better interest rate and a lower down payment when you buy it as a primary residence first. If you buy
Nice.
it as a rental property, the interest rate is higher and the down payment is crazy high. So it's cheaper this way.
Nice. I think I wish that I spoke to you maybe 8, 9 years ago, but I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. And at least you have the key resource available, and the book is coming out to kind of drop those gems that everyone's looking for.
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, where can everyone find you to stay in tune? You mentioned the website, but just on a day-to-day basis, how can people get more info and gems from you?
Yeah, so you guys can find me on Instagram at the key resource. And once you find me there, if you heard this podcast, definitely DM me. I would love to chat with you guys. And yeah, I can't wait to see how your real estate journey goes.
Oh yeah, 100%. Now, one baby girl, one and done, or are you growing that out?
I am done and like I
Shop's
can't do
closed.
this no more. I cannot. Anyone who has done it more than once, you are a superhero. I'm done.
I always try to coerce people into the multiple life. I mean, two is copy and paste. Two is copy and paste. I'm just saying that.
I don't know if I would survive it. I don't
You can do
know.
two. You can do two. Three is hard. You get kind of. I always tell people it's no longer man to man. It's like zone defense, right?
That's hilarious.
It's zone defense once you have three or more. So
Wow. You
yeah,
guys are amazing.
you are
Hats
too.
off to y'all.
But Kendra, dope, and gonna be looking forward to watching your moves and see where you go internationally. It might be a HGTV special or show in the making, right?
Oh,
You never
I
know.
don't know.
There you go. But yo, it's blue dope.